Good morning, welcome to Talking Point on this pretty overcast Monday morning. I mean, it makes it a good day to have some Nescafe, and I'm enjoying some dark roast here, trying to deal with the weather. But I'll be honest, I actually prefer the cooler weather of it being overcast, but not necessarily do I appreciate, the unfortunate tendency for flooding, because we have infrastructure problems, because we have maintenance issues. And by maintenance issues, I mean we have a hard time maintaining, well, just about anything in this country. And I think that's a big issue. And Sean Michael Small here, of course, being joined by my co-host, Mr. Keaton Shaw, on Zoom. I believe he is now connecting to us. So I don't know, Keaton, if you're ready. I still see that you're muted. But good morning, Keaton. How is the weather by where you are?
Good morning, Sean. Good morning to everyone. The weather by me right now, it's settled a bit, but up until about 10 minutes ago, it's pouring down with rain, as they like to say, raining cats and dogs. It is unfortunately flooding, and that's why I'm doing the show via Zoom this morning and not in studio. But hopefully all of that disappears very shortly. I mean, we live in the tropics, so this is all part of the story. And more so with our drainage here in Trinidad, flooding is just, I guess have we grown accustomed to it? Have we?
To some extent, I guess, yeah. I think you could say that. I mean, I'm not entirely sure, because I kind of just woke up and started to get ready, and it didn't seem as overcast when I now woke up. So I think the weather system was maybe a bit more to the east. But I do think one of the drains by the bricks was actually quite high, and I'm not gonna lie, I have serious questions with regards to. I hope that renovation and construction for that new establishment or the rebranded establishment did not have is not causing any issues with drainage. But I mean, this is Trinidad and Tobago, so it wouldn't necessarily surprise me if it did. But be that as it may, I hope that all of our viewers are not dealing with any serious flooding issues. Let's head straight into the first topic. I mean, there is still a lot. Oh, I do need to point out, Keaton, I don't know if you saw, one of the local papers had a very, very biased headline. I don't know if you noticed, it was a very biased headline. It carried the words of the opposition leader calling for the firing of the AG, which is ironic because on one hand, to me, I don't necessarily want to just take such a demand and run with it. I don't like doing that, calling for someone's job. On the other hand, while the AG hasn't really done much, so you could say he hasn't really done much to warrant his firing, the one or two things he has done, or one of the main things he has done, has been quite a big snafu. We've spoken to Edward Karen. I don't really have a defense for him. I just find it interesting. And I wonder how many PNM supporters are now basically saying, look, you see, the media is biased against the PNM again.
Well, you see, the unfortunate thing is, as I mentioned last week, and as a couple of individuals mentioned last week, being in our position is very difficult, oftentimes. And to be quite honest with you, personally, I know, Sean, that you were being a bit sarcastic, and I understand why. I don't think the article itself was biased. It was quoting directly from the leader of the opposition. However, people may interpret that differently. So, whilst media reporting, Sean, is questionable to say the least here in Trinidad, I mean, not to get sidetracked too much, I was reading one article in which, unfortunately, a young girl passed away through a vehicle accident over the weekend.
Yes.
One outlet, Sean, was saying she was the lone occupant of the vehicle. Another news outlet was saying that she was the passenger, but the driver escaped. And it's very hard to understand why there isn't any level of cohesion in terms of our reporting, and you have to question which is right or wrong. But anyway, I'm just pointing that out. So reporting is questionable at the least, but the pressure now on the media by citizens, especially when you report facts, and then you have analysis of those facts, and those analysis may be interpreted as biased. It's very difficult. In relation to the Attorney General himself, it's a very tricky situation. I know we had a conversation with Karen last week. I do not necessarily agree with the opposition leader stating that we're in a constitutional crisis. And I'm hoping that she would be willing to elaborate a bit further on what she means by that. But certainly, the fact that the Attorney General has vowed to remain silent inspires absolutely no confidence, especially when we're trying to get some answers to questions that are no longer questions. The Miami court has given a ruling, and we need to hear his side of it now.
Yeah, I think I'm not necessarily going to automatically agree it's a constitutional crisis, but at the same time, I can't discount the fact. I don't know. So as previously, we need to wait on and maybe consult with some more legal-minded scholars in order to get an answer. I don't have it in this case. All I'll say is this. It did start off as a joke, but the point I really wanted to make was not necessarily to go after people who called us about having the media having an anti-UNC bias, but rather to point out that I very much expect for PNM supporters to look at articles like that and to say that the media has an anti-PNM bias. And then at some point you do have to ask the question, well, the media on a whole cannot have two different biases at the same time. You know, it's just that from the perspective of the different supporters, what they're willing to accept is different. But let's end that there. Let's actually get to the...
Sorry, my apologies. I don't mean to clash with you. I was just wondering if I could quickly get your opinion whilst you touched on that. There was another article, interesting enough, in another outlet, which stated that the opposition leader is the favorite to win the upcoming interim elections of the United National Congress. And it went into an analysis where you got political analysts giving their opinions. But in that instance, do you think that that is the right thing to do? Do you think that media outlets should be having articles saying that the opposition leader is the favorite to win, considering these are the opinions of political analysts?
Technically,
there's no scientific pools, put it that way.
Technically, I don't see a problem with it unless the reasoning is unsound. And given the fact that she has a slate, which means that the majority of the incumbents in the party seem to have her backing, I very much doubt anybody is going to be the dark horse and going to unseat her with no real indicator that it could happen, just out of the blue. So I don't have a problem with that kind of reporting because at the end of the day, you know, it's pretty obvious, right, to the eye test. They're not necessarily telling us anything that we can't figure out. If they wanted to say that she was going to lose, I'll actually quicker question that because ethically speaking, what is the point of just pushing something like that, which I would not necessarily say is a reasonable argument to make right now. That's not to say that it's impossible for her to lose. It's just that I don't think any sane person could reasonably say she has no chance of winning. It's quite the opposite. So there is, of course, the ongoing question, the first actual topic that we have listed for this segment. There is an ongoing question with regards to food security in TNT. And I think, unfortunately, this is one of those things, and I will be frank, the economic situation, it has hit my family hard, and I do look at the price of food in particular, especially when you go out to buy stuff to eat. I haven't necessarily felt it quite the same way in the supermarket. But especially when you're going out to buy stuff to eat, I feel it's very obvious to me. And, you know, it seems as though this is something that possibly it could just get worse in the future. And, you know, we're continuing to get warning signs. And I hate to say this, but by all indicators, unless something very extreme happens, the war in Ukraine is very likely not going to end within the next 6 months. That to me, that seems very likely to happen just based on how it's been going over there and the fact that there's been very little progress on either side for the last month and a half or so, it could easily get drawn out unless Russia's economy collapses. Either way, both of those nations are holes now in the global economy and food production. So, Keaton, what is your perspective on this?
Well, overall, it's a situation that has been developing over the last couple months. Well, need we say, over the last year. After the COVID-19 pandemic, we very much were aware that China started to purchase a lot more feed in order to supply its local pig market, obviously producing pork, because the Chinese do consume a lot of pork. And that's really what started off the trend. It's now affected other meats as well. Poultry, we see with chicken, the price of feed has also gone up. And we actually have to import feed. I know that the Ministry of Agriculture were looking at cheap alternatives. So not only has that affected the supply, but also price has gone up, obviously. Then coming forward now, we have the Russian-Ukrainian war, however you want to deem it, if it's a military operation, if it's an invasion, whatever it may be. And I don't think people truly understand the extent this war is affecting the world as yet, because of the impact that it's had on the food market, especially in terms of wheat and grain. Ukraine was one of the world's biggest suppliers, biggest exporters of wheat and grain. And to compound all of that, Sean, something which we saw as an after effect of the COVID-19 pandemic when we started opening back up was the mere fact that the cost of shipping has also skyrocketed. There's been a shortage of shipping containers. And according to one importer, they're paying the money, even though fares have increased astronomically, they're paying the money, but ships are bringing in the product whenever they feel like, and there's actually no authority that they can go to in order to deal with that situation. So it's a combination of many factors. But the question remains, and you know, truth is, we've always spoken about diversification on the show. We've always spoken about exporting food products. Now the question has flipped. It's not a matter of whether or not we are able to export food products from our agricultural industry. Are we able to feed our own selves with our current agricultural industry, whether or not that will make up for the shortfalls?
And I think one of the key things to note is that a lot of people with their armchair generals or politicians or policymakers, they wondered, well, Russia might get bailed out from China or India doing business with them, buying their oil. And I'd just like to say it's not that simple. You don't just buy, you know, double the amount of energy that you're buying from a supplier. You don't just shift your who you're selling it to just like that. Your distribution channels don't just shift just like that. And China's economy has some serious issues with regards to its construction industry. And it basically, there's a housing bubble, maybe of a slightly different nature, but the long and short is that I think the effect might end up being very similar to what we saw in the States, I believe in 2008. I can't remember if I'm mixing up the financial crisis, but the long and short is the investment money into property might be wiped away by the issues that they're having in that sector and the overreaching and stretching themselves too thin liquidity-wise and taking on too much risk, which is more or less what we saw in the US and their housing bubble bust. And all of those things could further cause serious issues, particularly China. I think that point that you made there, not just with their food shortage, but also the fact that the shipping container shortage to some extent kind of begins with them, because that's where the demand for shipping containers to a significant extent starts, but the empty containers, for whatever reason, cannot make it back from the Western Hemisphere back to China, or even potentially from Europe back to China. And with regards to the shipping, one thing with the shipping container shortage, it's in part because there's difficulty clearing cargo ships in ports. So that's why all these schedules are probably very much what's the word? Everything is delayed, everything is late. Now, I'm not entirely too sure why that's happening in the Caribbean region. I do know why that would be happening, say, in the Western United States with I think 40 to 60% of the shipping coming through basically one area. It's technically two ports, but they're side by side in Los Angeles. So all of those things are more or less affecting shipping globally. And then even if we're importing the food close by, just the increased prices globally is going to increase prices locally and regionally. So even from the eastern United States, thus, it's not going to be so simple. And as their economy also is in a strange spot now, that's going to affect us. So basically, any economic news around the world, we need to look at, because it's going to eventually just filter down to cost of bread, cost of rice, cost of potatoes, cost of meat, cost of vegetables, just about everything.
But you pointed it out a couple months ago, and we could go back to that. With respect to Trinidad, shipping is delayed when compared to other countries because we're the last in the Caribbean in order to get imports. A lot of ships actually prefer to now dock in Jamaica.
Yes.
A lot of them actually prefer to dock in, which I found amazing, but it's true in St. Lucia, as compared to Trinidad. And the thing is, it goes back to a couple of things. First of all, disposable income has now decreased. Salaries have not gone up. In fact, over the course of the pandemic, salaries were cut. Whether or not we're seeing companies now able to gradually increase the salaries of their employees, that depends probably on the company and its operations. That's one. You go to a grocery now, you do your shopping, the same number of items and the same brand of items that you would have purchased in January. Fill up your cart, you would have purchased in January, and let's say you paid $500 for it. Now you're paying close to $900 to $1,000 for the same brands and for the same number of items. Prices have increased. And then I just want to make a point. When we heard of the mid-year budget review, it was all good news. Yes, the economy is resilient. The economy is doing great. And I think that's fantastic news. There are external forces and external factors which obviously will impact upon us, as you would have just mentioned, in relation to external economies, the cost of shipping, and labor outside of Trinidad and Tobago. There's a labor shortage outside of Trinidad and Tobago as well. So bear all that in mind. Internally, if our economy is resilient, I can't see why it is the government cannot put in place measures to ensure that the cost of importing food is decreased, such as the charges associated with clearing, with ships docking, as well as clearing containers, is decreased. Guyana actually implemented a policy similar to that. And the Guyanese government said it's actually going to cost the Guyanese government, not in terms of money they spend, but in terms of money they receive, a couple billion Guyanese dollars. But they had to do it for the citizens because they know that it keeps the circular flow of income going as well. Apart from fees, why is it that at the same time there's still a major lack of foreign exchange? If it is our economy is doing resilient, is it because our oil and gas markets are not doing as well as the government have indicated that they are?
I think that is one of two questions there that I wanted to ask. Well, three. One of them was prompted by what you said there with a labor shortage outside of TNT. And I do wonder, that made me think, did the closed borders because of the pandemic disrupt the flow of unskilled labor and where you would have had migrant labor dealing with certain things, particularly with things like farms and harvest season? You go to Canada, I think it was for apple farms, I can't remember exactly. Of course, in Florida, in Texas, there'll be migrant workers across the United States there to harvest or certain crops that can't be harvested by combine harvesters. And the flow of that might be disrupted. Yes, borders might be opening back now, but I think, again, it goes back to when you upset the equilibrium, it's not always going to be pleasant when things have to rebalance, and that's what we're seeing with the shipping container shortage. But that question there that you ended with, I also had that same question. Why exactly do we have a foreign exchange shortage now when the price of oil is practically double what was budgeted or near double what was budgeted? What has gone wrong? So there's two indicators now. There's the lack of any extra revenue or excess revenue in the HSF. And at the end of the day, it's over 10%. I would think it's reasonable to assume we're over that 10% threshold, so there should be some excess revenue, and that has to automatically go into the HSF. And now, with foreign exchange still potentially being a problem, this is the one thing high energy prices should have been good for us, regardless of how much actual money we're making or not, regardless of all of the extra costs that might be involved, etc., at least the foreign exchange, the balance of trade should have been affected in a positive manner. And if it's not, I just have to ask why, because that's very alarming. If we can't have enough foreign exchange at this level of energy prices, well, then our entire system of how we depend on energy for foreign exchange just no longer works, if that is the case. And then finally, I do have to ask this. We have issues with shipping containers and delays with cargo vessels, I get it. What about inefficiencies in the Port of Port-of-Spain? Because one of the issues is the Port of Los Angeles, and I can't remember the other port, but they're side by side, they can't offload ships fast enough, and that's adding to the costs of clearing cargo. Part of the cost for our cargo could be the inefficiencies in the Port of Port-of-Spain. And that is one thing besides diversification that could be having an impact, or the lack of diversification, that could be having an impact on our food shortage, on our food supply problem. And it will probably, well after this thing is somewhat resolved, it will probably still be an issue because unless we're never going to import food, the Port of Port-of-Spain is going to have an impact on our importation bill.
But Sean, you raised a very valuable point there, and that is in relation to not only inefficiency, but bureaucracy, which is in itself a form of inefficiency. And you mentioned diversification as well. Let's remove diversification for a section of this conversation and focus on what you mentioned there. If it is you were to resolve the issues surrounding the inefficiencies as well as the bureaucracy associated with operations here in Trinidad, that in itself could save you cost. That in itself could save you money. That's a positive to the economy. Governments come and governments gone have not done that. They've criticized governments when they were in opposition. They come into place now, they have not done that. And interestingly enough, removing that, we could speak about the unions right now, but I don't think it's necessary, and I don't think we have time. Quite frankly, if you deal with those inefficiencies, it's a positive. And the very final point I want to make in relation to this topic is the Minister of Trade and Industry, the Honorable Paula Gopee-Scoon, she mentioned that we are not suffering from a shortage of flour. What the minister should address is the fact that in order to have, because we have producers down here of flour, what she needs to address is that in order to produce flour, the raw material is wheat. As far as I'm aware, and somebody correct me, as far as I'm aware, we don't produce wheat in Trinidad. So there is a huge possibility that very soon, if major nations are experiencing shortages with wheat, very soon Trinidad and Tobago is going to be facing that. Because we don't produce wheat down here.
And it's not like wheat is a tertiary or whatever comes below tertiary source of food. Wheat is a very important staple culturally for the island. Ironically, while we do consume a lot of potatoes and rice, most dishes that we think of as Trinidadian dishes kind of begin with flour, right? Think about it. With the few dishes we have, yes, okay, callaloo, macaroni pie, we import the macaroni so in some cases, but I think we make macaroni as well locally. if I'm correct, right? That takes flour.
Yeah, we do.
Right?
But that takes flour as well.
Bake and shark. So the bake takes flour, fry bake, or roast bake, or hot coconut bake, whatever.
Dumplings, sada roti, doubles,
Roti, bus up short, everything. All of those Trini things, with the exception of maybe rice and pilau,
fried
starts
chicken.
with flour, right? So, and then of course we need it to fry, exactly. But
Yeah.
let's take up into that. All I'll say is this, and this might come up later. You know, it seems as though when necessary, the government tries to keep a lid on bad things. But before I won't get into that.
Sean,
we need to just touch on.
Thank God for the rain. Thank God for the rain because the grass is going to be juicier when it's time to eat it.
Oh Lord. So I just want to touch on, we do have a second topic for this segment, and that is basically with regards to unreported financials from the regional corporations. It brings into question the management because they haven't reported financials for 5 years, if I'm not mistaken. And now that the property tax situation has come up, and we're not entirely sure how it would end, but it seems as though the Minister of Local Government has claimed that he is lobbying himself out of the job or campaigning himself out of a job because the financial reporting will go to the Ministry of Finance. It's just that all of these things are nice, but if the regional corporations haven't reported their financials for 5 years, and I think this echoes the sentiment of our caller from Shaughnessy, Professor, with regards to the annual administrative reports, what else is not being reported and thus not being properly controlled? Because at the end of the day, I don't know about other people, but when you have a small business, you can't monitor everything in person. But what you can have is your reports and your paperwork to make sure everything is monitored somewhat, even when you're not there. So we can't expect the Prime Minister to literally go in every regional corporation and double check their financials in person, or the Minister of Finance. But the reporting is supposed to, feed that information to them for that purpose. And it hasn't been done. And by 14 regional corporations, I assume that means PNM and UNC corporations, which is interesting.
But, the entire thing about local government reform was to give regional corporations more power. This here is directly an argument against giving them that power. Because if it is that they are not able to actually apply their responsibility and their duty that they have before this local government reform was actually debated and is about to be implemented, then what's the point of now having property tax into one fund that goes directly into these regional corporations when we are not guaranteed to get any level of accountability or transparency in relation to where the extra tax is going to, how our money is being spent? You have a corporation such as the Point Fortin Borough Corporation with outstanding reports that dates back 22 years. Cuba Tawiki Talparo, 13 years. You have the Tunapuna Regional Corporation, the Port of Spain, the city of Port of Spain, for 12 years. And you've got Chaguanas and Sangre Grande, Siparia for the last 8 years. So it goes back as far as 22 years, some as little as 8 years, and I can't believe I'm using that term, as little as. But in comparison to the others, it's extraordinary. So this directly correlates to them having absolutely no. I don't think it's very difficult now to see them making an argument that empowering the regional corporations is better. It's difficult now to understand why they would report directly to the Minister of Finance when all along these reports didn't go to the Minister of Local Government. These reports went directly to Parliament. So who's to say, Sean, that with the new reform that this is going to change? I want more transparency and accountability before I feel, before I want some sort of guarantee before, we start getting taxed at the end of this year.
Basically, yes. Because, how do we know they will report to the Minister of Finance? We don't know. One thing, though, and again, it seems as though PNM, UNC, it's an issue And while, yes, the government right now is going to take a bit more of the brunt, so like the Procurement Act, you know, we don't know how well the UNC would have handled it. But the PNM is in power right now, so they're going to bear the brunt of the responsibility over the last 7 years of it not progressing as far as we would like. Maybe, you know, the other party will come in and we'll see what they could do or what they can't do, and then we could criticize them there. However, with regards to the corporations, it's not solely owned by the PNM. So it does kind of make you wonder just how serious are politicians on accountability and transparency when you could argue the junior politicians, the regional corporation people are potentially junior to the national level politicians in a lot of respects. They are, with some exceptions, you know, they are already, you know, 10 years plus in some cases in non-compliance with
Sean,
just standard practices.
This is not, and I'm glad you pointed it out, this is not a PNM or a UNC thing. This is a PNM and a UNC thing. All these regional corporations, Siparia, Tabakit, Cuba Tabakit, Talparo, Sangre Grande, Shogunas, those are at the helm of the United National Congress, right? The People's National Movement, you've got the Port of Spain City Corporation,
Yep.
you've got San Fernando,
Yep.
you've got Point Fortin, you've got Diego Martin, you've got Tunapuna, all that is at their helm. This is a PNM and a UNC thing. So at the end of the day, you can't say we're politicizing it. You can't say we're being biased. If both sides are doing the same nonsense, then, I mean, come on, somebody tell me a legitimate reason for this happening. Did they run out of paper and ink, just like how they run out of fuel for the Coast Guard?
Keaton, I will close this segment with the famous line, "It's a conspiracy of laziness against the people." Folks, we have to take a break. When we come back, we'll go into a slightly uplifting topic. Stay tuned. Keaton Shaw, Sean Michael Small, Talking Point on WSN, your content capital.
We dare you to dream, to see beyond the struggle, to envision the possibilities, to live life with unlimited vision. Ferrera Optical supports you with complete eyewear starting at only $795. Let's make those dreams a reality. So book your visit via 227-7000, WhatsApp message 278-2878, or at ferreraoptical.com today. We dare you to keep going. Ferrera Optical says, don't limit your vision.
Let your voice be heard. Call Madam Fix It on WESN, the only place that effectively helps you with your woes. Having problems getting onto government agencies, water woes, NIS and pension problems, potholes, and much, much more. Call me, Madam Fix It, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right here on WESN. Let me fix it for you.
Group C clash between Trinidad and Tobago up against the Bahamas. It's the second match in this year's tournament for both sides. TNT were beaten 2-1 away at Nicaragua, so they need a win to stand any chance of topping this group. While Bahamas got all 3 points at home to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Another win would put them in a great position. Noah Powder put into a dangerous area, back of the net. It's 1-0 already to the home side, Trinidad and Tobago. Levi Garcia, good skill, flicks that one up, it's a header, crossbar and over. So close that from Dwayne Muckett. Effort from way out by Noah Powder. too far away.
For men to go beyond, sometimes we're not doing it at all. We play the game at one pace, but we not, when it reach here, and Judah get here, we get Levi here, and Paula here, so when he can't cross the ball, they go, but we need goals, we need goals. For the jump back like this, come on, we need goals. We can take that fight, get that fight. Ruthless, okay, come on. Come on, give more goals.
Levi Garcia, wonderful touch, tries to hit it early to Dwayne Muckett. He does get it to him. There's a chance for Muckett out wide on the left as he shoots. He goes for the cross. And the ball is cleared. I think Muckett thought that Levi Garcia was going to continue his run. For Bahamas, and can they do something with it? Good skills, good dribbling, and in the end, it took Keston Julian to come back and clear the danger.
Well, that was a TTFA short film on their match against the Bahamas, which we edited down so you could get the full short film. I believe it's 15 minutes, just under 16 minutes on the TTFA's YouTube page. But therein was one victory. I believe, Keaton, that you had a panel for that game, that home game there, where we only scored one goal, and as you could see, the players after their coach actually spent a good amount of time there. We only just showed a brief portion of the halftime with regards to admonishing them for where he felt there was not enough effort and not enough strategy. And the players said, we need more goals, we need more goals. And then Friday, well, you know, you could kind of say we did get more goals. So at least there's some improvement. But more importantly, you know, yes, it might be small teams, but at least we can say we accomplished what we had to accomplish, what is expected of our team, and that is to beat smaller nations so that, you know, when we have the more challenging matches, at least we're not already out of contention.
Well, yeah, that game against the Bahamas, in which we were victorious 1-0, was an interesting game. It was a tale of two halves, and that was in the first half. We were excellent. We were attacking the goal. We were making use of our attacking players by penetrating the defense of the Bahamians very easily. Because I'll be honest with you, Sean, Bahamas probably had about 9 players in their box, excluding their goalkeeper. So they were defending very heavily in the first half. And in the second half, we saw a completely different game. We saw Trinidad and Tobagonian players huffing and puffing. The physicality decreased. It seemed as though they couldn't run the full 45 minutes. And the Bahamians, they started attacking. At one point, you thought they were going to score a couple of goals. It was quite scary and worrisome in the second half, but I think luckily in the end, and I use the term luckily because we played brilliant football in the first half, second half, not so much. We won the game. And I think we won the game purely because of a poor Bahamian defense. And then on Friday, we played St. Vincent's and the Grenadines in Arnisvale in St. Vincent. And we were victorious 2-0. The 2 goals were absolutely beautiful. The first one was he flicked with his left boot. I think you were there. You saw it.
I saw one of them. I don't think I actually saw the second one. Our TV was monitoring the game, but I was busy doing something, so I didn't see that one. So I'm not entirely sure how that one happened.
Second goal was beautiful as well. It was a curling header into the left corner of the St. Vincent net. And again, a tale of two halves. Beautiful first half. We were attacking, playing brilliant football. I know all of us were actually on our feet in the first half of the game. And then in the second half, that changed again. Not that St. Vincent attacked as much compared to the Bahamians, but they still played great football compared to Trinidad, who, again, the issue seems to be the physicality of the players. They seem to be unable to run a full 90 minutes of a game, which is very poor. It's extremely poor because it's not like you can change all 11 players at halftime. Again, we were lucky enough to win that game 2-0. Now, whether or not we're going to see something different tonight when we play the home game versus St. Vincent and the Grenadines, that I guess we will find out. However, with all that analysis that's said and done, we seem to be doing well. We seem to be picking up points. And though it may be on the smaller side, the mere fact is 3 points on the table is 3 points. So it's either the top spot or the second place spot, though I'm hoping we are aiming for the top spot. You mentioned playing against the bigger teams. I don't think we're ready for that as yet. I don't think we're capable of playing the bigger teams as yet. And I'm not trying to be harsh in any way. I'm just trying to be realistic. We're bringing back football to Trinidad. I'd like to see more support for the football. This is what WESN is doing. This is why WESN is bringing the football to you. And as we bring the football to you, I hope to see more fans in the stadiums. But in order to attract the fans, you have diehard fans who will support Trinidad and Tobago no matter what. But in order to support the younger crowds, the new generation of supporters, we have to play a lot more attractive football than what we're seeing right now.
Well, I mean, that therein lies the nature of sports and team sports. You will always have to rebuild your team once your stalwart veterans age out of the sport. Everybody has to go through it. And you can't make the mistake of not supporting your team while it goes through that process, because it only makes it far more difficult, potentially even near impossible, and then it will end up being a failure to launch. But we'll have to stick up in that there. That said, though, it looks as though, at least we're going in the right direction. So let's continue to support our guys as they try to move this train forward. As difficult as it may be, they have our support here at WESN. So let's take a break right now. When we return, we're going to have our Monday media ambassador contributor with us to talk about some of the more pressing issues with regards to the crime situation in TNT and how we're managing it. So stay tuned to Talking Point. WESN, Keaton Shaw, Sean Michael Small. We'll be right back.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11 a.m. only on WESN, Content Capital.
The Mary Immaculate Prayer Group and Friends presents its prayer breakfast on August 31st in aid of Monsignor Christian Pereira. The prayer breakfast begins from 9 a.m. at the Cathedral of Immaculate Conception. Cost is only $200. Come support the Cup of Gratitude in aid of Monsignor Pereira, August 31st.
Hello. Mumsy look brawling. You! Mumsy look brawling. There's something about this, you see you! Yeah, Mumsy look brawling, calling.
This is the Funniest Dad Moment promotion on WESN. Send us your funniest dad moment to thecontentcapital@gmail.com. This is your chance to win a fully loaded hamper and lots of cool prizes. The Funniest Dad Moment on WESN, Content Capital.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you, what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through? Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sport?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing on it.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is it no pressure on Nicholas Paul?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
Welcome back to Talking Point, and we are joined, of course, with the TTPS Media Ambassador, Acting Superintendent Ashraf Ali, who is here to talk about some of the important crime, issues plaguing the country right now, and maybe shed some light on the challenges of the TTPS. We have a few topics to get into. Of course, good morning, ASP Ali. It's a pleasure to have you again.
Yes, it's a pleasure to be here again, and it's rainy Monday morning in Trinidad and Tobago.
But so let's dive right into it. Of course, there was a major arrest. It was a sex trafficking ring. What made it notable? One was, yes, it's sex trafficking, but also a member of the TTPS was implicated or has been accused in the crime. Now, I don't know if you could give us any updates on the case recently. But I also want to ask, with regards to investigating any matter, not necessarily just with this matter, what is it like for the police service? Because I think people might be quick to assume, well, that's not right. How could the police investigate the police? You know, how does that function? So for people to understand.
All right, so firstly, let me just commend the officers of the Northern Division for their diligent work in this exercise. Is human trafficking is a serious offense and something that we are concerned with, and we continue to investigate all reports that come into to our fore. Now, in this specific circumstance, the officers of the Northern Division would have gotten information, went to a location, executed a warrant, and while in that search and executing the warrant, they received additional information that led to more information resulting in another search of a police officer. As a result of that, the officer was arrested and put before the court for human trafficking based on the information that they received through that investigation. Now, in this circumstance, once any division or any officer gets information about a criminal activity, it is investigated, and if it's a law enforcement officer, active or otherwise, when I say otherwise, he may be on suspension or he may be on vacation, may sick leave or whatever circumstance, an investigation, the person will be charged because you committed an offense. Now the other agencies kick in. So then we have PSB, which is the Professional Standards Bureau, would now have a simultaneous investigation to determine what additional charges can be laid. If the circumstance surrounding the investigation has to do with some breach of internal discipline, we have the complaints department, the TTPS complaints department will deal with such. If it's a criminal activity, then we have the PSP that will deal with it. But in this particular circumstance, it led to the arrest of the officer because of the good work of the officers in Northern Division CID, resulting in this. And this is more or less the kind of trend when you have investigations leading up to, or investigations involving law enforcement officers, police officers. Yes, the question may be asked whether or not the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is competent and capable of investigating their own. The data will show that we have arrested a number of police officers and have them before the courts. We have competent, trained, and integrity within those departments that can do the job. Like in every other investigation, we can stand up to any scrutiny as to the processes that we have followed and the actions we've taken. And the court will determine at the end of the day whether or not our actions taken against the police officer can stand the scrutiny of the courts, right? But we do have competent authority within the TTPS to manage and investigate our own, right?
Well, Acting Superintendent, if I may just ask you, in relation to this particular trafficking ring, that, and again, all credits to the police service and the officers involved. I look forward to hearing more and more stories such as this. But it's reported that foreign nationals were found by police officers on the premises of which they searched. In this particular instance, what happens now with these foreign nationals? Is it that they are housed in Trinidad in terms of the process of the investigation and then the matter being heard in court, which could take years? Or is it that they are sent back to whichever nation they came from?
Well, in these circumstances, it all depends on the nature of the circumstances, in circumstances and how they entered Trinidad and Tobago, right? Immigration would be automatically engaged, and through that department and our counter-trafficking unit in Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, Trinidad and Tobago counter-trafficking unit, which is also a part of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and we have a national security to work hand in hand with each other. They will determine, do their own investigation in terms of where they came from and what action to be taken. If it's an immigration breach, immigration would give them detention orders. They will be sent to the immigration detention order center, and held there pending the outcome of the court matter. You know that we already have persons who are looking for asylums in this circumstance, and persons who are under the umbrella of human trafficking. They are not coming in Trinidad and Tobago willingly, right, to their own accord. They have been illegally smuggled in, and they would want that opportunity to go back home. So that is where the government of Trinidad and Tobago and the government of the other nationalities would have to liaise and make their necessary arrangements in the forthcoming weeks to have those persons repatriated back, depending on the circumstance. So this is it's one aspect of the investigation in terms of the persons being charged. Then there's another process that has to go through the Ministry of National Security process to determine how and when the repatriation, and if any repatriation, will be taking place. That's where the Minister of National Security will discuss from, will implement from his department.
Well, I mean, we're running out of time, and to that I have to apologize. You know, the time on the show, we got off schedule, but I do want to just drop down to the last topic that we wanted to talk to you about, and that to me was one of the big ones, because if you just watch the news, I've noticed that there was a fair amount of reported deaths due to COVID, and now there's still an ongoing number of TTPS members being reported to have died from various illnesses. It's not necessarily disclosed what it is. And one of the things I did say during the public health regulations was that how much more are we going to add to the TTPS's plate? So I was saying that last year, and now this year we see more or less that more things as well are still being added to the plate of the service. And I do have to ask now, on top of the challenges, because we've been saying, well, crime is rising. That's a narrative. I don't know if we have statistics to definitively say how much it has risen, if it has risen. But it feels as though it has risen, and in some cases gotten more out of control. How has the service been able to deal with the stress of the situation? Because I don't think it's easy having to bury members for various reasons, and then also having to deal with all of these extra duties on top of crime, your primary function, kind of blowing up in different areas.
Well, it's an interesting perspective at the same time. It's the reality that we are facing right now. And part of the 2022-2024 strategic plan of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the Commissioner has put that on the agenda, where we would now want to encourage and have systems in place where we take into consideration the health and wellness of the officer, specifically in those areas. We are the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Policing is really a stressful job on its own, right? It has all its natural stresses. add to that, we have, with the COVID pandemic, we had a lot of officers who would have gone through the whole COVID thing, and they're still suffering just like everybody else with the effects of long COVID.
Yeah.
And we still have the other where family members are also contracted COVID. So we still have that stress in society, which is not unique to everybody, to anybody else, because we have it twofold. Because we are also required to enforce COVID regulations and take care of ourselves and all the precautions, as well as engage with persons who may or may not have COVID at the same time. And we find out about it in the venue. So that psychological and a mental stress that you're going through, you're not too sure about it. It takes a toll on you. The police hospital now has been engaged in doing a little more in terms of monitoring of the officers' health, right? Because we know diabetes is one of the things that holistically in Trinidad and Tobago, it's not for the police officers alone, but in Trinidad and Tobago they said that we have a high diabetic rate with diabetes. Hypertension is one of the things that we look at also. And all those things that when you listen to your doctors, they say stress brings it on. So
Yes.
how do we manage the stress? We're in a stressful environment, and these are side effects of medical conditions with stress. So we also have that aspect of it. Our employee assistance program have counseling. We have the social departments within the police service try to counsel the officers, because I mean on a daily basis we see situations. For instance, you may have officers who have domestic situations home, and someone comes and reports a domestic situation similar to theirs, but you have to give advice to that individual or guide that individual accordingly about a situation that you are trying to grapple with. How can you really advise that individual when you are in that same position? So there's where your empathy comes in, and you may end up giving the wrong advice because you really don't know what to do.
But then there's also the fact that the public, as crime is going out of control, the public is demanding the police service to do more. And I think we alluded to this in a previous conversation with regards to school violence. I mean, once the police has to really get involved, it's almost as though the systems that's supposed to be there for the children kind of have failed, because I don't think we have enough police service members to deal with the sheer amount of students and the potential sheer number of cases that we could see.
Exactly, and with the involvement of social media at this point in time, we are under scrutiny at every corner of the streets. Whatever action we take is being scrutinized and criticized via social media. So we are under tremendous stress from that aspect of it. So stress is one thing that we really can't get away from, but it's how we manage that within the TTPS, and that's part of our mandate going forward, where our social programs within the TTPS, our mental health and our mental fitness is managed, so we can be able to give a better service, because we don't want, and we already have officers who really and truly are really under some serious stress, but because we are only human and we are facing this on a regular basis.
Keaton, as we have a minute left, any last word?
I just simply want to say to Inspector Ali, thank you very much for joining us on Talking Point, not only now, but in the weeks to come. I always believe communication with the citizens is very important, and we appreciate the efforts on the part of the TTPS to clear up some questions that we, as well as the public, may have. But I also want to commend the TTPS. I know often we highlight the negatives, and very too little do we highlight the positives, and certainly the stories that we've covered in relation to the sex trafficking ring bust. Also, we didn't get to touch on it much, but I like to highlight it one time, the car theft ring as well. You know, commending the TTPS for their efforts, and to all the police officers, keep up this great work. We look forward to more of this. So thank you very much, Acting Superintendent Ali.
Thanks very much. And just want to reinforce to the public, we have inclement weather. Be safe on the road, be cautious. We expect to have traffic, and you have to be a little moderate in how you approach this situation. Be patient. We can't be impatient, because we don't want any fatalities, and the roads are wet. All right, so have a good day. To you all, gentlemen, and to your listening public, be safe out there.
Thank you, Acting Superintendent. Well, folks, that is unfortunately all the time we have here with our media ambassador, but you can catch him every Monday on Talking Point. But for now, we'll have to break for news. News on the hour on WESN. When we return, we will give you the Royal Castle question of the day. But we'll save that when we'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Seven is out. All day is in. WESN News on the hour.
In this season, we talk more about health, wellness, and everything in between. I am so excited to share with you everything about health and wellness so that you can design the life that you've always dreamed of. Join me here on What's Up Doc.
What's Up Doc? Tuesdays and Thursdays here on WESN, Content Capital.
I am Rondell Donowa, attorney at law and host of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Strictly Legal is a legal program geared towards informing you, the public, of your legal rights, responsibilities, and remedies. So be viewing Thursdays 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11 a.m. only on WESN, Content Capital.
Burning questions, urgent topics. Welcome back to One on One, the show where we tackle the most current and pertinent subjects that are affecting all citizens, where we ask the hard questions and have in-depth conversations. What separates One on One from other talk shows is that the conversation stems from a younger perspective on topics that affect the fabric of our society. One on One, Wednesdays at 10 a.m. on WESN, Content Capital.
AM Prime on WESN, the only place from 6 to 7:30 a.m. where you can get the most analytical and thorough interviews and regional reports.
The Barbados Labour Party, led by the Prime Minister Mia Amor-Mottley, once again able to achieve a clean sweep in yesterday's general election.
I think a lot of people have underestimated the power of Tobago nationalism.
If the government is afraid to say it, I, Martin George, I am saying it this morning on your show, Andy, there will be no carnival before Ash Wednesday.
Grab a cup of coffee and start your day right watching AM Prime with Andy Johnson weekdays from 6 a.m. only on your Content Capital, WESN.
A reminder from WESN. We urge you to protect yourself and others from the spread of COVID-19. Stay safe by taking some simple precautions. Clean your hands often. Use soap and water or an alcohol-based hand rub. Maintain a safe distance from anyone who is coughing or sneezing. Wear a mask. Don't touch your eyes, nose or mouth. Cover your nose and mouth with your bent elbow or a tissue when you cough or sneeze. Stay at home. If you have a fever, cough and difficulty breathing, seek medical attention. Following the above can help us all to help each other.
Welcome back to Talking Point. We just had the TTPS Media Ambassador on going through some things with regards to the TTPS. I think it's important that we understand or we get some of the explanations of why things operate the way they are so that we could then criticize them fairly, praise them fairly, and more importantly, point ourselves towards solution-oriented discussions as opposed to just, hey, this going bad and this going wrong and everything is wrong and everything is negative. That unfortunately, is, that tends to be what the country is sometimes, That's what rum shop politics tends to be. Usually you point fingers across the aisle, never at yourselves. But regardless, Sean Michael Small, Keaton Shaw here, welcome back to Talking Point. And let me hit you with the Royal Castle question of the day. Do you think TNT's agricultural sector can supplement our food shortages? Do you think it could happen? Do you have confidence that it could happen? Because I think we might have the capacity that is untapped. That doesn't necessarily mean it will happen. Do you think it can happen? And of course, we're going to open up the phone lines to hear from you, the viewer. If you have anything that you want to say, we want to ask us, or if you want to ask something from the media ambassador, we promise he will be made available. He will make himself available for calls in the future. But if you have any questions, we could take a note of them and maybe ask him next week. Or if you want to talk about something else that we haven't touched on, of course, call in. Let's hear from you, the viewer. The phone line, unfortunately, as my co-host would say, TSCT again, the phone line is open, folks. The number should be up on your screen. Call in, let us hear what you have to think. Keaton.
Sean Michael Small, do you think TNT's agricultural sector can supplement food shortages? That's a two-fold question. To a certain degree, it can. At the same time, no. One of the biggest influences that will affect this particular question is the palate of Trinbagonians. And I believe that we've had a couple of economists touch on that before. For example, why is it that we're importing avocados from St. Vincent and the Grenadines? Mm-hmm. Why can't we just accept the fact, that avocados is a seasonal thing? Enjoy it while it lasts. Why it is that we are importing from, again, I believe it's St. Vincent and the Grenadines as well. Avocados from Dominica, but St. Vincent and the Grenadines we get ground provision and seasoning from. Does that point to the fact that we actually don't have enough here within our local markets to supply it in itself? So there's so many angles in order to try and answer that question. As it stands, I don't think it is the case, although I must admit I've seen a lot more local produce, a lot more vendors trying to push and sell local produce on different roadways here across the nation. And it's a positive thing, but the palate of Trinbagonians has to change as well. We need to start enjoying the gifts of God and the fruits of nature that we've been provided with. And now and again, we can treat ourselves to certain things that are not necessarily ours. So it's honestly, whether or not the agricultural industry is up to the task, we also have to look at ourselves, as you alluded to earlier.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's a double-edged sword, right? It's a case where, will the entire industry be able to give us the quality that we're looking for? Or will it just be limited? And because it's limited, because we're not going to necessarily get enough investment, enough expertise, enough management, enough efficiency, enough production, we'll get some people will be able to do well, but it just won't be enough, and therein lies the concern. Because this is an opportunity for people to start new businesses, but of course, that's easily said, not so easily done. But it is an opportunity. It is an opportunity. If we could figure it out and figure out a way to ensure that the industry is self-sustaining and we don't have to import seeds and import feed and import too much, if we could figure out how to make it self-sustaining enough, at least. We might still need to import certain things. Hopefully not everything. Then this could be not just food security, but also the employer. We saw the lines at the cruise ship. We saw those lines. It was only for 200 jobs, I think that initial tranche was being offered. And we saw the amount of people that wanted to go there. So it just shows that we need jobs. We have a caller on the line from Tunapuna. Good morning, caller.
Hi,
Morning.
Good morning. Calling from Tirapuna.
Yeah.
The question, what's the question? Could you repeat for me, please, again?
Do you think that our agricultural sector can supplement our food shortage? Can our farmers actually make up enough of our food shortage for it to matter? Do you think we could do
Yes,
it?
we can. But if we have no bias in respect of promoting the agricultural sector, remember we had a prime minister who coming into the office said we don't have land for agriculture. So he started with a negative thought. But if given the opportunity, we can. And further, to go further, why we can is because we have to go beyond agriculture as we know it in the past. We have to mechanize the agricultural sector for us to make a profit. Could I touch on another point, please?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I know this might be tiring for you all, but is Trinidad and Tobago a real place where the Attorney General is concerned? I want to know. I really gotten fed up of this person who comes into office and the first thing he does is to make one big lie. Is the Raul government and the PNM, the DNA of them is to lie and recruit people in their government as liars? That's enough for the time being, gentlemen.
Thank you, caller. Thank you for that. I can't disagree with you. When it comes to the AG's office and this current government and just generally the legal areas of governance, I do have a lot of questions and I don't have a lot of confidence and I don't have a defense. There's nothing I could say in good faith to defend this situation. Keaton, before we have the next caller, anything quick?
I agree with you. The Attorney General's continued silence baffles me. I don't know if he's trying to build a legal argument or seek.
It doesn't baffle me. He's not a politician, so he doesn't know what to do. I understand that.
Sean, he may not be a politician, but he's a lawyer. He should be more skilled in the art. You know, he's qualified in the art. He's qualified
courtroom, but not PR. I mean, the last Attorney General, it was reversed. He was skilled somewhat in PR, but not in the courtroom, and look what happened. We have another caller from Dabadi. Good morning, caller.
A very pleasant morning, gentlemen. Gentlemen, I must say, first and foremost, that it's the second time I'm calling the program, and I do appreciate the objectivity, and I think that you don't taking any side. You're very qualified. I like the commentary with respect to the sports, and now and then I might not agree with some things with you all, but I think that I like the objectivity and I love the program. To comment on the question that's been asked concerning the agricultural sector, I think that any blind person can see that there is a research in agriculture in Trinidad and Tobago, especially coming not from the Ministry of Agriculture, but the programs that are being promoted by the Minister, my DNS, Foster Cummins. And I think that doing that, the whole regeneration and new infrastructure, it is relatively new because I want to speak very blunt. You had most of the time the Indo-Trinidadians who manipulated the agricultural sector, you know, where they had the lands and they did a lot of produce. You find that the young Indo-Trinidadians have been abandoning the agricultural sector. They have been leaving their normal traditional agricultural chores to go on to professional, different professions. What I want to say now, you realize that there are many, many persons going back to the land. There are many persons having backyard gardens. So I think that with this trust, if it continues in the near future, we will be able to sustain ourselves. Our neighboring isle, Tobago, which has actually, they too had abandoned the agriculture. And to me and my post reason, everybody is going back to agriculture. I have a batch plant in the back of my yard now. I have pawpaw, and I am utilizing the small space I have to plant something. So I think in the near future, if we continue with this trust, we would be able to see Trinidad and Tobago dealing with some of the food shortages, and we need to stop the importation. We need to stop that massive importation so that balanced trade could be, the ratio can be dropped. All right, guys, wonderful program. I love it, and I love to and listening.
Thank you, caller. Well, I think, unfortunately, that is, I agree with you that we need to lessen our balance of trade. I don't know if we could stop it. That might be too difficult. I don't know if we could
Well,
stop it.
first of all, thank you very much to the caller for your support, your kind support, and your compliments. We'll try and continue as best as possible. But you raised a valuable point when you said Indo-Trinidadians were moving away from the land and seeking to further their education. And I think the younger generation on a whole, people were moving away from the land and seeking more of an education within, as they say, having that piece of paper, your certificate on the wall, means a lot now. It's your passport to the world. But you're right. That's what I said, Sean. If you notice, you see a lot more vendors now popping up, selling produce. And you're absolutely right, caller. A lot more people are now going back to utilizing whatever small piece of land that they have to try and plant, whether it be garden vegetables, whether it be seasonings, whether it be fruit trees. You're seeing a lot of that happening now.
It was a side effect of GATE. I'm not saying it's a bad thing and we shouldn't have it. It's just a side effect of GATE where trades and things like agriculture, mechanics, carpentry, plumbing, those things suffered. We didn't have a proper plan and we did not include them enough into our tertiary plans. We have a caller from Chaguanas. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning, Professor.
I don't know if you read an article over the weekend by Selwyn Cujo on a history of the names of our major ethnic groups in Trinidad. It's an excellent article which shows you proper research rather than the sort of things that have been going on. And secondly, I have already proven to you that we have the capacity in Trinidad to produce all our foods which can be grown over here if we properly employ town and country planning, not to move good agricultural lands and allow people to squat and do all kinds of things in it. If the government would enforce the terms and conditions of their leases for agricultural land in Trinidad and stop sabotaging it. We had one prime minister who removed the restrictions on agricultural land to people to allow them to do what they want, and many other things. I could talk an hour on it, but you get the drift and all. A lot of them I already will speak to you, unless you have any questions for a change.
Well, so we part of the question is to hear from the other members of the public. So I understand that we've had that debate, but I think it's also not about the capacity. It was about if we will actually get it done, if our farmers could do it, if the industry could get it done. I think I agree with you, and we agree with you that the capacity should be there, but right now the government is not taking the lead on it, and we're seeing good signs, but obviously we're not there yet to really make a dent in our importation food bill. But yes, we don't doubt that we have the capacity. We have a caller from Tacarigua. Good morning, caller.
Hey, morning.
Morning.
Yeah, hello.
Yes, you're live on air.
Calling from Tacarigua.
Yes.
A lot of people have been advocating that people plant and do this and do that. Let me tell you something. You see planting thing in your yard? Hello, you listen?
Yeah, we're hearing you.
All right, as far as people advocating that you should plant home by you and all these things, that's a dangerous precedent. Yeah,
No, don't listen to
You have
TV.
to have police protection for that, because when you planting, man waiting to jump your wall.
Yes, I know you
You
were going to say
understand what I
that.
say? The farmers should, police should provide protection for the farmers.
Yeah, yeah.
Farming is for farmers. They plant and we buy. But when I planting in my yard, man watching, you know. And when
Yeah.
night time come, they jump in my wall and TV. I ain't planting nothing. Let them protect the farmers and for the farmers to supply the country with food. And we go and buy it. That's how it's supposed to be. Everybody has to live. You agree?
Yeah, I mean, yes.
I hear you, caller. I hear you.
Radio
That's my
larceny is a
contribution.
problem.
I mean,
Thank.
we hear that man jumping in here just so anything they see they want to thief.
Yeah.
When they thief your crop, your plant next day in your house.
Yeah.
I find to me that is total nonsense, fellas. Sorry to say, I ain't planting nothing. Thanks for the call.
Thank you, caller. Thank you, caller.
I'm laughing because, forgive me, the caller, the way he expressed it, he has a point. You know, it's a good angle to look at. That's often been the case. You know, you have a mango tree in your yard. They're climbing your wall at night to take your mangoes, but also if there's any manticores or iguanas, they're going to steal that as well, and soon they'll make it into your house. I wouldn't necessarily want to discourage anybody from having a small seasoning patch or a nice vegetable garden in their backyard, but I hear the caller's point of view, and yes, farmers need protection.
And the Pradial Larceny unit did have a work stoppage about a month ago. I'm not entirely sure what the current situation is. So there is also that issue as well. That's also something hopefully we could get into with our media ambassador of the TTPS. We have a caller, however, from San Fernando. This might be the last call of the morning. Good morning, caller.
Hey, gentlemen, how are you doing?
We're going all right, we're going all right.
Good well.
I think we do have the capacity. However, what will have to happen is that people's taste will have to change. If it is that there's a shortage, there will be food available. Because if you go to the markets in South, you go to the Maribel, go to the DB market, the amount of produce that there is on a weekly basis there, we have the capacity to do it. And there are more and more and more people coming in doing farming. You'll be surprised to know how much younger people doing farming in the southern area. So I think we have the capacity. Thanks.
Thank you, caller.
Very much, caller.
Therein lies, that goes another layer beyond when I said, well, what about the port and the inefficiencies of the port? What about the inefficiencies of our road network and distribution channels internal to the country? And I think he more or less touched on that there. It's nice that we have food in South, but if it costs so much more money just because it's in a truck and it goes to Port of Spain, it's kind of ridiculous. And it kind of does a disservice to both some of the sellers and some of the buyers. But the potential is there. And I think that's also something that, if it was worked out, made it a lot easier. If the truck didn't take forever to get into Port of Spain, then the sellers could afford to sell at a little bit more reasonable price. Buyers would have a better priced alternative.
Well, Sean, you might see farmers soon taking the water taxi from San Fernando to Port of Spain just to transport their produce. Because,
we have a water taxi again?
Well, as far as I'm aware, they're running on a daily basis now. I hope that it continues. But you're absolutely right. There's so many factors that go in. The Pradial Larceny unit of the TTPS, they were out of work for quite some time. I think they're back on the job now. Farmers were complaining. You have the drainage factor now in terms of when it rains, whether or not we're going to lose crops. Because there's not. And by the way, yes, I totally and completely understand that we have a major drainage issue in Trinidad, especially when it comes to regional corporations and land development. But also, I hope that these new farmers have proper irrigation systems in place that will at least be a proactive measure in themselves, helping themselves. We have that issue as well. The road infrastructure and the road networking has been an issue. But, I'm glad that the caller from San Fernando raised it because, again, it's similar to what the caller I believe from Dabadi was stating, we're seeing more and more people actually going back to the land. People can't find jobs now, so they're choosing that, we're not going to try and wait for an opportunity. We're going to create an opportunity.
Keaton, you pointed out labor shortages outside of the country. We have food security issues. People need jobs. Just because we have a supply and a need, it doesn't always mean that it lines up and it gets implemented. Do you think enough people, maybe we should have asked that, or that could have been an alternative question, are enough people, I'm sorry, we don't have any more time for any more calls, viewers, but Keaton, have enough people gone back to the land that we have enough farmers now? Because I think, as mentioned before at Gate, the caller said, farmers were looking, and to be fair, at that point in time, I think it was reasonable. Farming was not necessarily as profitable, but now it might be again. Do we have enough farmers?
I don't know if we have enough farmers. We're certainly seeing a lot more than before. And the positive with this is that as more and more people get into it, you have your fingers crossed that more and more produce will flood the market. And when more and more produce floods the market, you're going to see fewer costs due to the amount and due to the competition. So the cost will decrease, hopefully, if that was the case. The caller from San Fernando was right, pallets also have to change. But Sean, this is a question that I had posed to Dr. Indira Sajeewan Ali when she was on the program about 3 weeks ago. How is it now that we go about making this industry, this sector, more appealing to the younger generation? How do we make it more attractive in terms of them coming to work the land once more? Whether it be through incentives by the governments, there are already agricultural incentives in place. Are they enough? I would debate that with anybody anytime they're ready.
Are they implemented well enough?
Yes. And the thing now is, if we're seeing more people willing to work for themselves, be their own bosses, be entrepreneurs, and feed Trinidad and Tobago, then certainly we need to make this market more attractive.
So most people will think, cost of shipping, war in Ukraine, not enough foreign exchange. That's why we have high prices of food. But there's also other things that we could try to fix. Poor drainage that leads to flooding, that affects our yields. Do we have enough farmers? Why do we not have enough human resources? Why do we have a port that's inefficient? Why do we have a distribution road system and transportation system that is not efficient enough? And those extra things are adding to the food bill, to the price. It might not seem obvious as, say, just a shortage in grain globally. But all of these little things matter. Interestingly enough, there's both the for and against argument for depreciating the dollar, the exchange rate. Because if the exchange rate was worse, then local food would be much more competitive, but then other imports would be far more expensive, and that would be a problem. The flip side is, if we continue trying to keep the exchange rate where it is, foreign foods might still be too cheap. I mean, even with the raises, foreign food might still be too cheap. But it all depends. I think if there's money to be made, people should flock to it. It's just to make sure that they understand how and that there is, and hopefully they will do it.
And it takes money to start a farmer. You have
that's true too.
Yeah.
That's true. It takes money to make money. That is a friend of mine who started his own small business. That is one of the big brick walls that he's run into. But we are more or less out of time on this rainy, cool, chill Monday morning. I want to thank all of our callers for calling in. Professor, yes, we hear you, but that technically wasn't the question. But thank you for calling in anyway. And yes, any other administrative reports, people. Any other administrative? No, it's true. It's true.
Well, the prime example is from the regional corporation.
Exactly. So, people, Keaton Shaw, 10 seconds, quick.
Today is a good day to have a good day. Be safe out on the roads. Carry umbrellas as it's raining. Be safe when you're driving. Please do not speed. Wear your seatbelt. And hopefully we'll see you again tomorrow morning. Godspeed.
And remember, be your brother's keeper. And ladies, be your sister's keeper. We out. Stay tuned for more programming on Your Content Capital. We will see you tomorrow. Goodbye.